Blender for Noobs.
Hello, this is Dan Nobles and welcome to Blender for Noobs. In this video, we are going to look at doing some basic animation in Blender. Now, the reason I haven't done a video before, a tutorial for animation, is because really I've seen a lot of animation tutorials on YouTube and around the internet, and I thought it really wasn't needed, but a lot of people have been asking me to specifically do animation. So I'm going to go through a basic animation video. If you're new to Blender or fairly new and you're looking at animation, it will help you get up and running with animation. It's by no means, a comprehensive catch-all video for animation, but at least it should get you up and going. So to start out with, of course, I have my cube. I normally work in three windows. I have my top view, front view, and right view. You don't have to have that. In fact, if you want to work in the animation view here, the built-in one, that's fine as well. In fact, I'm going to be going to that view after a while anyway. But to start out with, what I'm going to do is we'll make things a little bit more interesting than the cube. I'm just going to X delete the cube as per normal. Okay, and you've noticed that I've turned on my screencast keys here, so when I type something on the keyboard or do something with my mouse, you'll see it right here, just in case you're wondering what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do right now is just do a Shift A and go to Mesh, and I'm going to add the monkey. And as many of you know, the monkey is included with Blender. Her name is Suzanne, a little bit of history there. Sort of the mascot of Blender, I guess. So we're going to use Suzanne as kind of our subject in this animation. And first thing I'm going to do, just to make things look a little bit better, I'm going to go to modifiers over here, add a modifier, and I'm going to add the subdivision surface. And I'm just going to bump this up to 2 subdivisions, so it's a little bit smoother. Choose T on my menu here, go to shading, and choose smooth. And that way Suzanne looks a little bit better. And to make things even more interesting, let's go over to materials and give Suzanne a material. I'm going to do a plus, choose new, double click in here, and let's see, let's do glass. Glass is always interesting, at least to me. So I'm going to choose down here on the surface, I'm going to choose glass. As soon as I find it, there it is. Okay, so let's see, let's go ahead. I'm going to change this window to, what am I doing? I'm going to change it from the viewport shading to rendered, just so we can get an idea what this is looking like. It's kind of dark right now because I don't have any lights, but I will shortly. Okay, and I'm just going to change the color and just make this a little bit more interesting. Okay, something like that. You can make whatever color you want, but for right now, that's what I'm going to use. Okay, so we need a few things in our scene just to help along, and we need lights, and we need our lamps, and we need a background. So let's do that. I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I normally do. So I'm just going to do a Shift A, go to Mesh, and I'm going to create a circle and tab into edit mode and just let's do it. Let's just do an F, make a face there. It's really an end-gone face, but that is completely fine. So I'm going to come in here, Shift select that middle face. Am I on faces? No, I'm not. Never mind. Go to vertex mode, and I'm just going to alt select in the middle of these vertices so I only get the vertices around there. Okay, I guess it doesn't matter because I'm in vertex mode. Never mind. Okay, 7 top view, and I'm just going to S scale this out. And make this quite large. And you'll notice in the new Blender, when you scale out something, it crosses your window like this, so you don't have to worry about continuing to, scale and scale and scale, which is kind of a little nice feature that they added. So That's quite large. I'm going to go to 3, which is a side view here, right view. And I'm going to extrude, bring it up a little bit like this, scale out like this, extrude, scale up a little more, and scale out, just so we have sort of like a funnel type thing there. I don't know why I'm doing it this way, because I don't normally do it this way, but I just had the idea that I wanted to do something different. So tab back into object mode, and while we're in there, let's go ahead and add a modifier to this. I'm going to add a subdivision surface and give it 2. Ooh. Let me undo this for a second. Well, see, I have a top face here. Sorry about that. Let me go to tab back in edit mode. Can't really even see it that way. So I'm going to go to faces and choose that one face, X delete faces. There we go. I was wondering why I didn't see the monkey. I'm like, where'd my monkey go? My monkey is lost. Okay, add modifier, subdivision surface, views 2, and T tool menu, smooth. Same thing we did with, basically with Suzanne, just so we have a smooth backdrop. And go to your materials, plus for a new material, hit new, double click there on the material name, and we're going to call this backdrop. Okay, and this one I'm going to give it the velvet material. Change this to, I always wonder what to give the background. I want it to be somewhat interesting, but I don't want it to collide with our Suzanne monkey. Bring up the brightness here. Okay, we'll try that. We can always change that very easily later on. All right, so we're getting there, setting up before our animation. With Suzanne herself, let me, oh, she's named Suzanne. Wow, I didn't do that right. No, that's automatic. That's cool. Okay, so I'm going to scale Suzanne up, because I'm going to make this a huge monkey head that we are animating around. Okay, so there's our Suzanne monkey, and now we're going to do the lighting. So I'm just going to do Shift A, create a mesh plane, add a plane, and go to 7 top view. Let's move the plane over. By the way, if you're not familiar with lighting and things like that, this is kind of a little tutorial as far as lighting, camera placement, and backdrop as well. So you're getting 2 for the place of 1 or something like that. So scale my plane up so I can see it. Okay, and let's go to 3, side view, Z, so we can get in wireframe mode so we can see what we're doing. Just going to rotate this plane. This is going to be a light panel. So where is my camera at? Camera is right there. I'm going to go over here, choose Control 0 so I can see what the camera's seeing. I'm going to go ahead and position this camera a little bit so we know what it's doing. Just G moving it upward. And G moving it back. Just kind of trying to position it. And you'll notice you're not seeing some of the background here. And the reason that you're not seeing that is because I've made this scene so huge that the clipping is coming into effect on the camera. So if you go to the camera properties and you look at clipping, look at your end clipping, this is the distance that the camera can see. You can bump this up, just drag it over until you see your entire scene there. Okay, and may have to do that some more. I don't know why I'm making this so big, but anyway, it'll be different. Okay, so kind of have the camera in place. Let me grab this light panel again, 7 top view, and just going to move it kind of behind the camera and rotate it. And let's go ahead and Z back into solid view, solid shading view. Okay, for the light panel, I'm going to go to materials, choose a new material, choose new, and I'm just going to call this lamp 1. And I'm going to choose the surface, and I'm going to call it, I'm not going to call it anything, I'm going to add the material to it, which is going to be emission, and that's right here. And let's go ahead and give this a strength of 10 to start out with. We'll see what we need to do. And another thing that I'm going to do is go to the data properties or object properties, come down here to ray visibility, and turn the camera off for the ray visibility for that panel. That way you don't see it. It doesn't get in the way. In other words, it's not rendered. Let me scroll out here, see kind of what we're seeing. Getting some fireflies in there, but that's okay. We'll take care of that in a little bit. Okay, so this panel right here is our key light panel. I'm going to basically set up 3-point lighting. So we're going to have a key light. We're going to have a fill light, and we're going to have a rim light. The rim light you can also think of as it's sometimes called a hair light or a background light. So this is our key light. Let me go to 7 top view, and I'm going to Shift D duplicate this light, and I'm going to R rotate, but I'm going to hold down my control button so I can see my rotation down at the bottom left of the screen. I'm just going to rotate it around. Oops. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Hold on. Okay. Let me change my pivot point. So I want to change from median pivot point to the 3D cursor. And then select my light again. Oh, it is selected. Okay, anyway, 7 top view. R rotate, hold down your control button, watch your rotation, and go to 45. This will actually be where we place the key light, which is 45 degrees from the camera. And then we can take this and we'll use this as the fill light and do a R rotate, hold down your control button, go the other way 45 degrees, and just put it right there because the fill light is 45 degrees from the key light. Okay, so now we need our rim light. We can just Shift D, duplicate this one, and R rotate, and you can just free rotate that around to the back where you think would be a good placement for getting the back. And really the reason for this backlight is to kind of highlight the edges of your subject, just so you get more of a realistic 3D look there. It doesn't, the shadows doesn't make it disappear into nowhere. Okay, so you see we're getting some light here. Don't like this view here. This camera, I'm going to select the camera, G, Z, Z, bring it back some more. Yeah, maybe right there. We'll see how that does. And then actually what I'll do, let me select this light and go to materials, just so I'll know which one I'm working with. I'm going to change this to key light. No, I'm not. That's the fill light. Sorry. I'm going to change this one to, okay, that one's key light. I'm going to give this one a new material, and we'll call it fill light. And we can remove this other one. And then this one, new material. And we'll call this rim light. And we'll remove the key light there. Okay, so now we got all our materials. I guess I could have just copied that material. It would have been a little bit easier, but anyway, we'll go ahead and change these to emission. So that's emission. I'll change this one to 5. Rim light, Change this to an emission. And we'll change this to 3 for now because it's not supposed to be that strong. And sorry if I'm boring you with the setup here. If you're familiar with this part and you just want the animation, I'll put a link in the video to jump straight to the animation stuff. But I just want a good, halfway decent scene to start out with so we can, we'll have something to render here. Okay, so let's change our pivot point back to medium point here. Just going to bring this light up. Not too much. And scale it up, give it some more light for the key light. Okay, what the key light does, I mean, it's your main light of the scene, but what it does is it creates some fairly harsh shadows. You can't really see it in this view because it's only rendering up to 10 samples, I think. Can't see it, but yeah, preview's 10. But what it does is it creates some pretty harsh shadows on your subject. So the fill light, that's what its job is for, is to kind of soften those shadows that is created by the key light. Okay, so you can kind of play around with the angles of the lights to make sure that they are hitting the subject correctly. The the rim light or backlight or hair light, whatever you want to call it. Normally it's kind of close to the subject, kind of pointing down on the subject because you don't really want it to kind of point directly at the camera. Anyway, you can kind of experiment around with the placement of the lights and see how you like it. But I'm going to do a render of what I have right now just to see if it's working out okay. Let me go ahead and save this. All right, and I'm going to change my render to 1280 by 720. Make it 100%. Render 100 samples probably is okay. I'm using Cycles Render just in case anybody's wondering. And you know what? I'm going to change. Sorry about changing so much, but I'm going to change the material. I always do glass for this monkey, so I just want to do something different here. Change this back to diffuse shader. Okay, I'm going to rename this Suzanne. And I'm going to go to the node editor. And to get rid of that window, I'm going to leave the diffuse. Shift A. I'm going to go to texture, choose, let's see, let's do the checker texture. G move this up and hook that together like that. And let's go back to 3D view. Okay, kind of weird, but anyway, it's different. All right, so I'll go ahead and do a quick render, which isn't so quick on my PC. Okay, Blender just did something that it rarely does on me, and it crashed while I was trying to do a quick render of this, but I'm going to try it again. So this is the render that I have. It's only 100 samples, that's why you see a lot of kind of graininess here. But even at 100 samples, you can see that we got some nice shadows going on here. We have, with our velvet texture, you can see how we have a gradual change in the darkness of the shading, the transition of the shading, which is kind of nice. And that's why that velvet material is so cool, or at least to me it is, anyway. So this is kind of what we have. But just to let you know, I'm kind of an idiot because I was sitting here rendering this. I was wondering why it was taking so long. It took 6 minutes to render this. And I seen that it was rendering 4 squares at a time. So I said, oh my God, I'm rendering with my CPU. So if I go to my render settings, sure enough, I'm using the CPU device. I had it set that way because I was doing another tutorial on cycles rendering, and unfortunately I left it that way. So anyway, that's okay. So we have our render, and now we can actually get on with the animation part of the tutorial. And let me change this over to GPU compute while I'm thinking about it. Look how fast that goes. Well, better than what it was doing anyway. And I was finally able to upgrade my my video card. I haven't. It's on the way. I haven't done it yet, but I've been waiting for this for a long time because I have an NVIDIA 650, a GTX 650, which is not a bad card. I mean, I can actually play Call of Duty Ghosts on it. It's kind of, not the best, but I'm hoping with this new card, which is, they finally came down a little bit in price, which is the GTX 760. I'm hoping to speed up my renders quite a bit. And just to let you know, I know this is way off topic, and I apologize, but just in case anybody's interested, the GTX 760, I did some research on these cards when I was looking at them. And if you can get two GTX 760s and run them in SLI, they will blow the Titan away. They will blow the Titan away by far. And that's, when I've seen that, it's like, oh, that's what I want to do. But unfortunately, my computer's so old that my motherboard doesn't support SLI. So anyway, I'm hoping to at least speed up my renders a little bit with a newer graphics card. All right, so there's Suzanne in her checkered glory. Let's go on with the animation tutorial. So I'm going to escape out of this. Let's go to 7 top view. Now, of course, you don't have to use Suzanne the monkey to do your animation. You can use whatever you like, but this is what I'm using as a sample. So when you think of animation, you can kind of do it more than one way. You can take the object and you can move it past the camera, and you can set keyframes so that, along your animation path, you will see the monkey or whatever your object is move past the camera. Or you can actually take the camera and render the camera. Move the camera and set keyframes so that only the camera isn't moving, and it makes it look like your object is moving. So you can picture this as sort of a race car or something, and you can move the camera so that it looks like your car is moving instead, of course. That's fairly simple to understand, I think. I think, for me anyway, the preferred way is to move the camera. And here is my reasoning, and I think it's pretty solid. Let me know if anybody has any other ideas. But if you say you have a race car, or in my case, I like to design spaceships. So if I have a spaceship or a race car sitting here, and I'm going to move that around to do some animation, I have things in my model like I might have a mirror. I might use one of these, let's see, mesh, or no, that's down here. I might have an empty, use one of these empties, and I may use that as my reference point for the mirror modifier. So if I start moving things around, I could really screw up what I'm doing. Another thing you wouldn't want to move your whole model around for is normally your 3D cursor, this red and white thing here, is in the middle. So when you create an object, Shift A, I'm going to create a good old cube. It is right there in the center. And it's just a good reference point for your model. That's why I say you never want to move your model around. Like I say, if anybody has any other ideas, let me know. But I'm going to move the camera. So the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to move these windows over here, and let me go ahead and I'm going to, actually the easy way to do this is ZZ, get back into the solid shadings here, just so it's not taking up our computing power, or my lack of computing power. So I'm going to make another window here, just drag this bottom left up, and I'm going to change this to timeline. For animation, these are your animation options, different settings you can go to, and I'm going to cover a couple of these in a minute, but we're going to start with a timeline because that is the easiest thing to do. So right now, because of your render settings over here, and if you look at your frames and all that good stuff, we are going from 0 to 250 frames, and you can see it right here. Start at 1 and at 250, and increment 1 frame. So when you render all this, it's going to render 1 frame at a time. It's going to render 250 of those frames, and because over here, if you look at your frame rate, 24 frames per second. If you divide that into 250, then you get how many seconds your animation is. So it is almost, it's about 10 minutes of animation. So one thing that I like to do and kind of doing a sample animation is I like to cut this down to 125 just so it doesn't take so long to render this out when I finally do my final render. So what you can do is you want to move the camera to get the view, whatever view you want to try to get with your object. You set keyframes along the way so that Blender knows where the camera is at any given time. It also knows how the camera is positioned, rotated, and, well, not scaled because scaling doesn't really do much on the camera, but it keeps all that information. So a very easy way to do this is I'm just going to hold down my middle mouse button so I can move this menu over a little bit. This piece right here is your automatic keyframe insertion. So it kind of automates things for you. So right now we're sitting on 0, which is fine. So I'm going to turn this on, click it, and I'm going to move the camera over, rotate it some more. Okay, something like that. Let's go ahead and kind of rotate it the right way here. Okay, so because we are recording keyframes, that movement right there on 0, if I take I think it's the right button on mine, yep, and move the slider out of the way, this yellow piece right there indicates a keyframe has been inserted. So Blender knows that the camera is right there at that point in time. So I'm just going to go up like half. I'm going to go up to like, let's go up to 60. And again, because we have record on, it's going to remember what we're doing. And I'm going to move the camera over to here, move it back a little bit, rotate it, and move it back some more so we see our monkey. Maybe move it down a little bit. Okay, so it's going to see that. Now because this is what it sees at that second point, it's going to factor in all those rotations and curves kind of smoothly so you don't miss anything. Anyway, you'll see that here in a second. So then I'm just going to hold down my right button and move this over. So right now I'm at the end of our animation. Let's go to 125, and I'm going to G move the camera, just move it over this way, R rotate, and I'm going to leave it at that kind of angle right there. That's fine. And because I have this turned on again, it's created a keyframe right there. So I'm going to turn this off and look over here. And by the way, if you're hearing things in the background, it is pouring down rain here right now. Hopefully the power doesn't go out. And my cat just jumped up and is probably going to jump on my shoulder and jump on the computer desk and knock everything over, including my microphone. But anyway, I'm going to go over to here. This play panel is pretty much, self-explanatory. I'm going to back up all the way, and I'm going to play, and you can watch over here what it does. So, pretty cool, huh? It's showing your path along this, your animation path, which is pretty much what we want. It looks like I'm probably missing some of my backdrop here, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's pretty minor. You can resize that if you need to. Okay, so that is automatic keyframe insertion, if we go back to the beginning and say I choose in here to look at our object properties, you can see these values are yellow. That means there is a keyframe inserted here. If I move up once, I didn't want to do that, right here, then they all turn green because there's no keyframe inserted there. So as you might imagine, you could, like, if you drag this over here, I don't know if you can imagine this, but you can do this. You can actually, if you won't need to, you can come up in here and you can insert keyframes. I just right clicked on this, and that's another way you can add keyframes. Another way is when you have your object selected. I have the camera selected here. I can choose I on the keyboard for insert keyframe menu, and you have a number of things you can do here, such as you can insert a location keyframe, a rotation, scaling, which again with a camera doesn't really do too much or nothing at all. You can do a location rotation, a location scale, location rotation scale, all of that stuff here that you have. I've never used this visual stuff. I'm not sure what that is. I'll have to look it up and see. But anyway, so you can insert a keyframe. Let me go ahead and insert a location. That's the location of the camera. So if we move off of this now, we see that we have inserted a keyframe. I'm going to go back onto this. If you need to remove that, you can either come up to your values here and you can choose to delete keyframes, or I think you can do an Alt-I. Yep, delete keyframe with Alt-I. So I've deleted that and it's gone. Okay, so those are different ways that you can insert keyframes. Now the interesting thing with that, with these values, say like, let me turn that off. Say if we, for example, cat is about to pounce on me. Okay, if I choose one of my light panels here and I go to, let's go to materials, and I look at the strength, I had this at 10, but say I wanted it to start out for whatever reason at 0. I could change this to 0 and insert keyframe. So you can see that how you could change a lot of these values. I'm just going to change that back. You can see how you can change a lot of these values. Cat is biting my elbow. You can change a lot of these values in Blender to progressively change. So I could say, okay, the light's at 0, come up here, insert another keyframe here, make it, 10 or whatever I want it to be, and the light can get brighter and brighter, which is kind of nice. You can do things like make lights blink that way, because you can set one, at 1.0 and maybe move forward a couple of frames and set it at, 5 or whatever, and go a little bit further and set it at 0 again, just to, just as an example of making a light blink. So those are keyframes, inserting keyframes. Now, before I get into actually how to render out this animation, just going to show you a couple more of those menus, and that is, if we go here, well, let me save this. Quick save. Stopped raining, but there's probably still lightning all over the place. Okay. So I'm going to come up here to our scenes. I'm going to change this to this preset here, animation preset scene. So this is what you get. You have your dope editor, and you also have this graph editor. So what are these used for? Let's scale back out. Or zoom back out. Let me select my camera. Okay, so you can see that depending on what object you select is what keyframes you select. So if I select Suzanne, you're not really seeing anything because we haven't added any animation to Suzanne. You're seeing all kinds of stuff when I select the camera because we added at least 3 of these keyframes here. So with the dope sheet, I kind of think of this as like a quick reference point. What you're seeing right here, if I go back to the beginning and then move up to the next keyframe and then the next, you're really seeing these 3 keyframes. So if you want an easy way to delete a keyframe, you can just come up here and select the top of that keyframe, and it will select all these. You can hit X delete keyframes and they'll be gone. So this dope sheet's kind of a quick reference, quick view of what your animation is. Now, if we look down here to look at our graph editor, we see a lot more going on here. So what is this? I'm just going to back up to the beginning of my animation. So we have the camera selected, so you're seeing camera, you're seeing the action of the camera, and you're seeing location, rotation, and scale all bundled together. So if we drop this down, you're seeing all kinds of stuff. So what this records is for each location, for each rotation, and each scale of your object, it's recording all those values. You can change all those values in your animation. So it keeps a running log of all those changes. So we know with the camera, we're really only dealing with location and rotation. We're not scaling anything. So definitely location. So if I click like X location, you can kind of see, let's zoom out here a little bit, what's happening with the X. Now, when you look at this graph, you can think of the horizontal view as the amount of time. In fact, you can see, from 0 to whatever down here. So you know this is the amount of time it's taken. And you can think of the up and down, the vertical, as sort of the distance, I guess, might be an easy way to look at it. So when you're animating something, and say if I go to top view and I play this animation, and I'm looking how this is going across, or maybe even better, do a Control-0 so I can see actually what's happening here. If I look at this and I say, it's not quite what I wanted it to do, it's kind of moving in and out a little bit. And if you want to change that, you can click one of these and you can actually, G move it, and you can see the effects of that, what it's doing. Now, I think in practice, I don't do a whole lot of animation, but in practice, this is sort of like a fine-tuning tool. You want to make fairly minute adjustments here. You wouldn't want to, go overboard and change things all around. But you can definitely choose the different axes for the different functions that you need here, and you can change them around. Like, oops, if I do the Z, if I can choose it, okay. So you can see how you can kind of play around with these values and change that. We'll bring this kind of back to where it was. So you see the Z, you see what Y is doing, and X, and these are all the locations. And then you can also see the rotations for Y. We're not rotating along the Y at all. Or I'm sorry, X. And Y is rotating somewhat there, and Z should be rotating quite a bit, because if Z's are basically our vertical axis that's we're rotating around. Okay, so anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of idea of these other windows. Your basic animation, though, can be done with the timeline. It's just when you get into, you want to tweak further, you can get into these other more specific animation windows. So I'm going to go back to our default view here. So we have our animation. So what do we need to do to render this out? Well, you go to your render settings. And once you have your animation set up how you like it, it's fairly easy to create the animation render. So under render settings, we need to double check everything that we are using. I'm in cycles, which I want to be. You look at your resolution. If you had it on like a low resolution to do test, you want to make sure you fix that. The 100, size of your output, probably, you want to have it at 100%. And you can look at your frame range. Do you have the right starting frame, the right ending frame? Frame rate, make sure, you're looking at, is this going to be the amount of time that I want for my animation? Because this preview is giving you a fairly good representation of what it's going to look like. But just double check your settings to make sure, you're going to have the amount of time that you want for your animation. And by default, just to let you know, when it starts animating and it stops animating, or the movements here, it basically what it's doing is it's easing into the animation. You can see it start off real slow and then it ends kind of slow. When you start to render your animation, you won't see in the preview that it's doing anything, and you'll be worried that, oh, it's not working. But just give it some time and you'll see the change in your preview window. Another interesting thing to note, right now I'm using Blender 2.7. Coming out very soon, Blender 2.71 has some updates to the animation, so you may want to check that out. They have updates to like the ease in of animation, which like I just basically show you, it has to do with how the animation transitions between one animation to another. So back over here, we need to look at our output for the animation. So I'm going to change this. And I'm just going to create an animation directory, another animation directory, and I'll put it in here, and I'll just call this test, and accept, and it adds that in there. So that way you'll know where your output's going to be. Okay, another big important thing is what kind of format are you going to output your animation to? Is it going to be image files, or is it going to be movie files, video files? Here is my recommendation. If you're just doing a quick test, you can do a video file. Oops. I usually do like an MPEG or maybe an AVI or something, but I would suggest only using the video formats if you are doing a quick test type of render that's only a few seconds long. If it's something more of a final quality product and it's going to be a long, I don't know, more than 7 seconds of animation perhaps, I definitely recommend using image files. Why do I say that? One very good reason. Well, maybe more than one reason. Anyway, if you output it to a video file and Blender decides to crash, or your computer decides to crash, or your power decides to go out, or something catastrophic in that manner happens, then you just lost your animation. Some of these formats may be recoverable. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure MPEG isn't. I'm pretty sure AVI isn't actually. But it's always been my experience with any program that I've ever used, View and all that, Adobe, all those, that if you render out to a video file, you're just asking for trouble. So the better thing to do is render out to an image format, either JPEG or PNG, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then use a program such as Adobe Premiere or something like that that will take those images and link them together and create, or you can render out the movie from that. That's the professional, much more preferred way to do it. There is a free program that does that takes your images and renders them out together. Can't think of the name of it at the second because I don't have it anymore, but if anybody is wondering what that is, just let me know and I'll try to look it up for you. So I'm going to choose JPEG. If you're doing something where you need transparency, you probably want to use PNG format or TIFF, something like that, but I don't need that, so I'm just going to use JPEG. So I got that set, and then you want to look at your render settings. This is pretty low, 100. I'm just going to choose 500 and get a little bit better render of my JPEGs. And that is pretty much all I'm going to change here. I got all that set. So once you have everything set the way you like it, you can go ahead and hit the animation button and it will start rendering out your animation frames. Just one thing that I would mention before you do that, you might just change your render samples to a very low number, like maybe, I don't know, anything from 1 to 10, and do a quick render out of your animation just to make sure that everything is working correctly before you take all that time rendering out, hours of animation or whatever you might have. So once you're ready though, I'm just going to do a quick save, Control S, quick save, and click my animation button And now that I have my GPU compute set up correctly, then you can see it's rendering, well, faster than what it was before. Still not that quick, but I am doing 500 samples on this, so it'll look a little bit better when it's done. So what'll happen is, you see your frame that it's rendering here. Once it's done with this frame, it should say frame 2. If it doesn't, then you need to come back over here and check that, maybe you could just hit render instead of animation. But just make sure, all those settings that we went over are correct. The other things that you see here now are, up in your status line is the time that your last render was. Of course, mine was 6 minutes because I did it stupidly. And then the time it is taking currently to render this frame, the remaining time to render this frame, which it may actually be that long because I'm doing 500 samples. The amount of memory is taken, the peak of the memory, the scene you're in the render layer it's using, path tracing, and the tile that it's rendering on your current frame, which right now I'm on 13 to 60 tiles. And then the number of samples that it's rendering in each tile, so you can see it counting up. Since I have 500 samples each, it's counting up to 500 samples for each tile. So once this is finished rendering out, I'm going to put these images together and export it as a movie. I'll probably do that in Adobe Premiere, but like I said, you can use different programs to do that with. And then I'll show you the end result. So here you can see our end result of our animation. Not too shabby. It's got nice little shadows going on here. We got our checkered look on Suzanne the monkey. We got our nice velvet transitioning backdrop there, which gives us kind of a nice background. The lighting doesn't look bad at all. And of course it's animating exactly the way that we set up our keyframes for it to animate with. So I hope you've enjoyed this basic tutorial on animation. I know I went to a lot of basic setup in the beginning, but maybe that'll help some others that are not familiar with that part of it. So again, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on basic animation. Please comment, subscribe. If you have any questions or suggestions, put them in the comments because other people read them, I read them, and we can definitely help each other learn that way. So definitely thanks to all my subscribers. You guys definitely rock. Thanks for watching.